If you find a nice bit of gold, should you go looking for the source? I mean, is it worthwhile to search for the source of the gold that you're finding? You know, pockets can be super rich. I know guys who found literally pounds and pounds of gold by finding a little bit of gold and tracing it up to the source of the gold. Pockets can be really good if you're in pocket gold country. Now, I'm Chris Ralph, the professional prospector, and today we're going to talk about how close is your gold to the source. I mean, if you find some gold and you look at it and you think, this has got to be a source that's miles and miles and miles away, well, you know, you're not going to be looking for it in that immediate area, right? Because it's miles away. But if you're going to be finding some gold that's rough and angular, you might say, hey, I'm probably pretty close to that source. It might be worth searching for a rich pocket. And I've done videos about how to search, but this is it worthwhile? That's what we're talking about today, is your source really nearby? How close is it? Now, most prospectors will just say, hey, if the gold is sharp and angular, you're probably close by. If it's rounded and smooth like a jelly bean, you're probably a long ways away. But, you know, what's the balance of that? You know, between one extreme, smooth as a jelly bean, and, you know, the other extreme, crystalline, rough, coarse, angular, sharp gold. You know, what's the in-between, and how does that play out? Well, I got a new tool that has allowed me to take some really great close-up photos of nuggets that allows us to see the texture of the gold. And the texture of the gold is the clue to tell you how close your gold source is. We're going to talk about that tool a little bit toward the end of this video, but it's going to be an interesting discussion and looking at some great examples to see whether you're close to your gold source or not. Now, usually the majority of the gold coming out of a single source of gold will have a generally similar appearance, generally similar textures and stuff. However, usually in a lot of places, the placer that you might find when you're out looking for gold in the placer area may not all be coming from a single source. And that's one of the things about looking for a placer gold source, is if you have multiple sources, it becomes almost impossible to trace them. If you have one or maybe two sources that are contributing all your gold or nearly all of your gold, those are maybe traceable. But if you have 15 or 20 little veins scattered here and there over a whole area, you know, the contribution of all those little veins may make for a nice placer in a drainage where you're working below them. But all the different sources, it makes it virtually impossible to trace them. But if you're getting gold, and most of your gold is sharp and angular, it's probably worth taking a look to see if you're getting all your gold from one source, and if you can possibly trace it to a source that might give you pounds from a pocket of gold. Now, another factor to talk about is that not all gold comes out of the ground sharp and angular. You can have gold that's coming from a very close by source that at least superficially kind of looks worn. And that's something I'll bet you may not have known. Yeah, it's true. Now, what happens is, how gold forms in quartz veins is there's hot liquid solutions that can be rich in gold and rich in quartz and rich in iron sulfides and other minerals and stuff. And when it gets the right concentration of gold and conditions change, the gold will drop out and you get gold deposited in a quartz vein or in some other kind of gold deposit. Now, those solutions can change. And, you know, if you have a saturated solution, it wants to drop out gold. But if you have a way undersaturated solution, like it's already dropped out its gold, but now it's been reheated again, it may want to take gold back. And so if sounds kind of crazy, but you can have solutions that deposit gold and solutions flow later through that same area that want to take gold out. And so it will literally erode the gold that was deposited previously. And we can see the same thing in gem minerals and stuff a lot of times. If you have the solutions that deposit the gold, you can get deposition, but you can also, under certain circumstances, get solutions that want to erode the gold away. However, a close examination of the surface texture of the gold that's been eroded versus gold that's been smoothed in a river and polished out can usually tell you the difference. And having this tool to be able to take good close-up pictures, I'm going to be able to show you that difference between the texture of a nugget that's been rounded and pounded and tumbled and rolled for miles, and a piece that's never really traveled very far at all. The texture, the surface is a bit different because the etching solutions leave an etched surface, whereas the river tumbling leaves a nice smooth polished surface. We're going to take a look at some examples, and you'll see the difference when I show you what we've got. Now let's talk now about how gold wears in a stream. One of the things that people get confused over is they think that gold gets broken up. Now, when you have like a piece of quartz or other hard rock and it gets pounded, those things shatter. But gold, it doesn't have a tendency to shatter like a hard rock. Like, if you put a rock on the ground and you hit it with a sledgehammer, that rock is going to just break up into a bunch of pieces. Whereas you put a piece of gold, don't do this, but if you did, you put a piece of gold on a slab of concrete and you hit it with a sledgehammer, it will mush out and flatten. It's a completely different behavior. It won't shatter and bust into a zillion bits like if you had a piece of quartz. So when gold goes through a stream, it has a tendency to get smoothed and rounded and flattened over time. Pieces that have been a long ways in a stream tend to be flattish. Now, that's not always true. You can get chunky pieces of gold in a stream that have gone a long ways, and you can get pieces that come out of the ground in their native form in a kind of a flattish shape. So just flatness isn't a guarantee of travel or an indicator one way or the other, because you can get flatness from both the original source and from river pounding. So let's go ahead and take a look at some examples. The first type of gold would be gold that shows no wear at all. This is the kind of stuff that all the sharp points are sharp and angular. Under magnification, like I'm going to show you, it almost looks like these things, you could rub your finger across it and it might cut you. These are really sharp, angular pieces. These things really have traveled no distance at all. We're literally talking about maybe at the most 100 yards or something like that from its original source. So these are the ones you really want to find because they're the ones that point towards a pocket. Let's take a look at some examples.
Here's my first example of really sharp, angular gold. All the pieces on the surface of this are sharp and they tend to be crystalline. There's not any significant rounding in this. And this is the type of gold that looks like it's come from very close to the source. And indeed it has. Here's my second example. The bits of gold on the surface of this piece are not as large as the last one, but even though it's smaller, you can see they're sharp and angular. There's no sign of rounding whatsoever. This is a kind of a flat piece of gold. I mean, it literally came out of the ground pretty much flat, but it still has the signs of being close to the original source. Here is my third example of gold that comes from close to the source. And you can see the surface of this gold is just really rough. There's virtually no smoothing. There's actually some pointy ends of it. And it just shows a sign that it really has not been worn or pounded at all.
The next category is gold that has just a little bit of rounding on the edges. And this is gold that's traveled just a little short distance, more than the other stuff, but maybe something on the order of a quarter or a third of a mile, maybe up to at most a half a mile. These are the kinds of things that indicate there's a source nearby, but it may not be in that immediate area. Still go looking for it because it's saying that it's nearby, but not in the immediate area. Let's take a look at some examples of this type of gold that's had just a little tiny bit of wear.
This piece has most of its original character, although it's clearly been smoothed some. You can see, though, the bulk of what it originally looked like. It's just been kind of rounded over the top and smoothed over the edges that stick up. And here's another piece that's been rounded on the edges. This is a piece rich in quartz, but it's been rounded along the edges where the gold is exposed.
The next category of gold we're going to look at is the amount that has more substantial wear, but still showing a good sign of its original form. These may have traveled, something like a half to maybe a couple of miles. Let's take a look at some examples of these.
So here's my first example of a very well-rounded nugget. You still get some feeling for the shape that it originally held, but pretty much everything on here is smoothed and rounded. It's not pounded into, an all-smooth shape like a jelly bean, but it's very well-rounded. It's certainly been in a river or a stream for a long time. Here's my second example of a well-rounded nugget, and again, pretty much everything on here is been smoothed and worn, but you can still get a feel for what the original shape was. It's just mostly been well worn. Now here's a nugget that looks like it might fit into the same group, but it doesn't. Remember, I mentioned to you that there are some nuggets that get etched after they formed, and so they have kind of a sort of rounded appearance. But if you look at the surface, you don't have all these rounded, smooth, polished surfaces. You have a few sort of rounded surfaces, and the rest has a rough edge to it, and that's the etched surface that was formed when solutions came across this piece of gold and actually took some of the gold away. So this is the kind of thing that actually says you're close to the source, like the original pieces that we saw at the beginning. It's not like the ones we just look at that are well-rounded, or the ones we're going to look at in a second that are very rounded.
The last category of nuggets is a category with real heavy wear. These are the pieces that are completely smoothed over. It's hard to tell what the original form of the gold was. This is the stuff I was talking about that's smooth like a jelly bean, but it also can be flattened into a good flaky type of nugget. These are the kinds of stuff that are really a long distance. We're talking maybe 2 to 5 miles from the source, maybe even more than 5 miles, maybe tens of miles even potentially, depending. So this is the gold that's showing a lot of wear, and you really may not be looking for a pocket nearby, although in really well-rounded areas like this, these can be bled off of things like benches or ancient tertiary channels. Because in the benches or the ancient tertiary channels, the gold was in a river. It did get rolled around. It did get smoothed out. But still, it shows that sign of wear. And, these isolated patches of gravel can then bleed off gold into an existing stream. It's not all that uncommon. And let's take a look at some examples of these really well-rounded pieces of gold.
So here's an example of that really well-rounded type of gold. This is a thicker flake. It's completely rounded and smooth. There's no guessing what the original piece looked like when it came out of the ground. It's just one surface after another that's been polished. Here's another piece that belongs in that same category. It's fully rounded, fully smooth. This is a little bit thicker piece, but still, there's no surface on here that isn't completely polished or worn or rounded. And so this gold has indeed traveled quite a long ways.
A completely different indicator that you may be close to the source, how close your source is the amount of quartz in your gold. It's angular, cracky, really sharp-edged pieces of gold mixed in with your quartz. Usually what happens with gold is it gets tumbled in a stream, it gets pounded, and although the gold will mush, the quartz tends to get broken up and kicked out of the piece. And so Close to the source, you have a lot of quartzy gold, whereas you tend to get away from the source, you have gold with only very little quartz in it. And that's even if it formed in a quartz vein. The farther it travels away from the source, the less quartz you're going to have. The quartz pounds out of the gold pretty fast, and so, if you're seeing a lot of quartzy gold in your pieces of gold that you're finding, you're probably within a half a mile of the source because it just pounds out that fast. Let's take a look at some examples of high quartz nuggets.
Here's a really high quartz nugget. You can see by volume there's a whole lot more quartz than there is gold. Now the gold, because it's more dense, may outweigh the quartz, but by volume there's a lot more quartz than gold. The pieces like this are often cracked and they easily break up and don't last long in a river or stream. So when you find pieces like this, especially if you find more than just a few, that's a good indicator that you're close to the source. Here's another piece of high quartz gold. You can see the quartz is already cracked up, and it won't take a lot of pounding or beating for this quartz to completely fall apart and for the gold metal to be released. That's why pieces like this, if you're finding a good number of them, are a good indicator that you're close to the source.
Now, of course, also there is gold in actual ores, quartz ores, although it tends to be that the gold in most gold ores tends to be really fine. Now there is, of course, because of nuggets and that sort of thing, gold that occurs in quartz that's really coarse, but the vast majority of it is pretty small. Let's take a look at some examples of visible gold in gold quartz ores.
One of the things that I wanted to show was that this microscope was capable of taking photographs of very small pieces of gold in hard rock ore. You can see in the center of this picture a little brown piece of what was once pyrite, but inside the pyrite was a piece of gold, and of course the gold does not tarnish. Do you see it? Just to make it more visible, I put a red circle around the little bit of gold. I really am pleased with this microscope, and I think it's going to help me bring you a lot of interesting images that you'll find very fascinating.
Now, all these photos I've shown you today are pictures of gold that I've found, either metal detecting or dry washing, sluice box. It's stuff that I've found over the years and then picked out as good examples for this video. But I've taken all these pictures with this new tool that I mentioned early on in the video. It's called, it's a video microscope, and the brand is called Tomlove. It's a great tool with excellent clarity, and it takes both photos and you can take live videos with it. It's got a 10-inch video screen that allows you to see the whole item. It has both a main light by the camera, but also two supplemental lights that you can put off to the side. And if you need more light, it's possible you can add additional light of your own. It also has a calibration function so that you can adjust the color to look like what the item really looks like. A lot of times on cameras like this, you get color, but it's not really quite what your eye sees. And so the calibration function allows you to calibrate so that the final picture shows the same color range that you would see with your eyeball. It also has a video output jack that you could connect to a television so that you could, look at stuff and share it with friends watching your TV. You literally could, take it from the microscope and put it on your television. So it's set up for that too. Now I do want to say that this particular item that they did gift this to me, but I'll tell you the truth, I've been looking for something like this because I have difficulty getting really good photos of gold nuggets and other things with my just regular camera. And so it's so much easier to use something like this to get good photos where it's set up on a tripod or set up on a bracket, and you can actually just take pictures. So I've been looking for an item like this video microscope, and I was really pleased when Tom Love contacted me and asked me if I wanted to share their brand with you. And I thought, hey, great, it's something I'm really looking for. And I think, if you guys are interested in taking pictures of some of this stuff, or you have other related items, you may want to look into buying one of these yourself. I put a link for it in the video description below. If you want to read the description and you want to take a look at it on Amazon, that kind of thing, that's where you can buy them. They're relatively inexpensive. They're less than $300, depending on how you get them. You can get some other models closer to $200, that sort of thing. So they're really a great tool. I really like mine. You're going to see more videos coming out with using this tool. I'm going to do one on gems and minerals. I'm going to do one on coins. I metal detect and sometimes find interesting coins, and I even collect coins myself. So we're going to talk about coins, and then we'll talk about ores. I think that I could use this tool to take a look at some different types of metal ores that you might be interested in looking at.
Here's just a quick picture of the device. You can see the vertical piece with the red stripes. That's the actual camera unit and focusing unit. The black deck below is where you place the object to be photographed. There's lights. And of course, you can see the TV monitor screen and the controls. It's really very easy to use, and I found it quite simple and no problem, and was very pleased with it.
So you will see more of this item being used by me in my videos in the future. Now, finding gold is a skill. It's something that you learn. You don't just, we're 150 or more years too late to just walk out there and trip on a 20-pound gold nugget walking next to a stream in the mountains. We're kind of late for that. But you can still find good gold. There's still gold out there to be found. But it's a skill. You kind of have to know what you're doing. I've been doing this for decades. And to make it easy for guys that want to learn more, that want to gain that skill, I wrote a book. It's called Fistful of Gold. And it is basically an encyclopedia of how to go out and find gold, and a lot of information about gold geology and related types of things. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my book right now. So let me tell you a little bit more about my book. It's called Fistful of Gold, and I wrote it because I want you to be able to go out and find for yourself fistful of gold. And you can see that it's an encyclopedia with all kinds of information, pictures, and that sort of thing. It's not in color, but color would have cost me a lot more to have printed, and so the book would have cost a lot more. It's for sale on Amazon, and you can pick it up. I'll put a link in the description below. I also serve as the editor for a prospecting magazine. It's ICMJ's Prospecting and Mining Journal. And honestly, you should check that out. We got stories and information, legal stuff, everything you know to increase your skills as a prospector. I write articles in this every month, and a lot of other very experienced prospectors contribute to the magazine as well. So check the magazine out. Also, I have a website, and the website is at NevadaOutbackGems.com. I'll put a link for it in the description below, but there's gobs of information there that you will find useful in your prospecting efforts. Finally, I want to say that I really appreciate your comments and thoughts, and even positive criticism. Don't come on there and just toss out insults, because I'll just delete your comments. But if you've got helpful things to say and questions to ask, do write and put those in the comments, because I answer my comments to people, and you'll hear from me in responding to you. So if you've enjoyed this video and you like what you see and you're interested in finding out more, well, then sign up, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so they'll let you know when I post new videos. And like it and share it if, again, you see stuff that you really are excited about. And I'll be coming out with lots more new videos, and so we'll see you again real soon.